I remember many years ago when I was living in Melbourne as a seminarian, we'd often go down to I think it was my music bowl, and listen to those wonderful concerts, classical concerts. And so we were out there listening to it, and the interval time came. So we were just kind of chatting among ourselves, and all of a sudden on the brow of the hill we could see this little boy. He was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and in the midst of all the people, he just yelled out, "Mom!" And the crowd went, "Oh!" You could feel everyone like, "Oh no!" You know, little boy lost kind of thing, and where's his parents? So we're kind of looking around to see if anyone would notice him or whatever it was like that. And, you know, it was probably only a few minutes, but it seemed like eternity. And then Mum came, or a female figure came towards him, and I think it was his mum, because he said, "Mum!" And everyone went, "Yay!" And they clapped, and it's amazing, the euphoria at seeing little boy lost found again. So the story we have in the Gospel was a very common story. I think we can relate with that story. Perhaps in your own life, you've had children lost in supermarkets. We have tragic stories even in this day of news, don't we, of little boys and girls lost, you know, and sadly, often forever, you know, they don't see them again. What's that little William Terry, you know, that little guy they're trying to find. It's a tragic loss, you know, we hear about this. And so we can get in touch with Mary's angst. She's anxious, she's frustrated, she's been trying to work out where he is. And imagine it, you know, we kind of read it and think, oh, what a nice little story, might have been pretty traumatised. But it was pretty bad. Like, when you think about it, they'd gone off out of Jerusalem for a day. It wasn't until a day after they realised that he wasn't among them. And usually the women and children would be together and the men would be in their own group. And sometimes children would just sort of hang around with their cousins and other kids. So Mary and Joseph just presumed that he was with the family somewhere along the line, with his cousins or with his village friends from Nazareth. So we don't have to worry about that. It's not until she begins to realise, and perhaps we've had this experience, you know, when one spouse says to the other, "Where's Jesus? Where's Johnny?" You know, "Well, I don't know where he is. You had him," you know, and you can imagine the dialogue between Joseph and Mary. And, you know, we're told that, of course, Mary immaculately conceived and Joseph was a bit of a saint, but, you know, it would have been pretty tough back in the day. The anxiety, perhaps they started blaming each other, although they didn't sin, because we were told they didn't, you know, immaculate conception. But there would have been a few words exchanged and tensions and frustrations. Then we're told it's about 3 days later. So imagine after 1 day, after 2 days, 3 days, after the first day, Mary must have been pulling out her hair. She was either saying, "Please God, help me find this child," or she might have been saying, "I'm going to throttle him, I'm going to kill him when I see him." Maybe she didn't say that. That's the Brian's version of the Gospel. But so, you know, we see her, and then, you know, just the overcome of emotion when they finally meet up with each other, found in the temple. And those words are quite poignant that Mary says. Mary, did you hear those words? She says, "Why did you do this to us? Why did you treat us like this? You know, your father and I were worried about you." We've heard those words before, haven't we? With our own children or our own relatives. You know, we're worried about you. Where were you? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell you were going to your friend's place? Why didn't you tell us you wanted to stay a bit longer wherever you were? You know, we're so worried about you. It's a very common thing. And so we feel that way too sometimes. God, why are you doing this to us? Why are you treating us like this? Today is the Feast of the Holy Family, and I get a bit funny about things like this because it looks very pious and very holy and very sanitised and cute little Mary and it's beautiful little Jesus. But in actual fact, the Holy Family struggled like we did. Yes, they had great joys and great blessings, but they also experienced great trauma. Imagine flying off to Egypt and, you know, the murderous king after their lives, and, you know, restrictions and things. We know the Holy Family story. Often we get kind of, "Oh, I can never be a Holy Family. I could never live up to their standards. They look just so holy in picture cards. I could never be pure and sanitised as they are." But, you know, we see in this amazing thing that, yeah, they struggled. So that question of Mary, why did you treat us like this? You know, what's going on? You know, What are you doing to our family? Now, perhaps we've cried out ourselves to our family, to God. What about so-and-so? He's not coming to church. Or what about this person, the black sheep of the family? Or, this person got into trouble again. God, what are you doing in our lives? And it's a desperate cry to the Lord. Mary says the same thing. Why did you treat us like this? Why did you make us worry? Why did you lead us down the path of doubt and confusion? And why did you make us run around all of Jerusalem trying to find you? Why did you do these things to us? And notice the response. Jesus says, why are you searching for me? Mustn't I be about my Father's affairs? In other words, I'm about the Father's business here. It's my concern to be with the Father. It's my concern to be with God. And all things are ordered and all things are at peace when we are about our Father's affairs. So perhaps that's the answer that Jesus gives to us in our crying out, Lord, why are you doing this to us? Why this bother? Why have you allowed this to happen? And maybe Jesus, God, is saying to us, it's okay. I'm doing a work here. I'm about my affairs. I'm about business here. I'm into business. And, some things we don't understand, we can't work out. Sometimes we just leave it to God. Just need to leave it to God. God is God. God is in control. Sometimes we don't think that. God has everything in control because he is the King of the universe. He's the God of our lives. If we are Catholics and we're faithful in our prayers and in our living the journey of Catholicism, we know that God has good. Things may not look good, and we want to fix things up. We want to be the Messiah, not Jesus. We want to fix things. We want to bless things. We want to order things out. But Jesus says, no, I'll be about my Father's affairs. Thank you very much. And so we get a bit of an echo of that in the Old Testament story today, where see the sacrifice that Hannah and her husband Elkanah offer to God their child. Hannah was barren, and it was a bit like Elizabeth in the New Testament. And she said to God, look, if you give me a child, I will bless you and the child will be given back to you. We know families, we know couples, we know experience in our own lives where it's very hard and it's a great trauma, great tragedy when people cannot have children. It's a great thing, a great thing. But I remember something that really shocked me one time. They said, we don't have a right to have children. It's not our right, it's a gift of God. Yes, children have rights, but we don't have rights to have a child. So when we do have children, it's a gift from the Lord and it's a gift back to the Lord. So we see in today's first reading, Hannah says, this is the one I prayed for, now I make him over to you. What a sacrifice. That's huge, isn't it, to give your children back to God. Okay, God, these are your gifts. Thank you for giving the gift to me, but I have to give it back to you now. My responsibility is educating them and looking after them. But God never called us to raise children. He's called us to raise adults. That's what I've heard. It's not my own thinking, but I read that somewhere. And we're so cautious and overprotective at times to look after our children and raise our children. But in fact, the Holy Family teaches us today that children that are a gift from God, we're called to raise them as adults, to make them responsible, to call them into leadership, to call them into decision-making, to guide them along the way when they falter and when they don't falter. This is what the family is all about. So it turns our whole understanding of what family is when we gaze and meditate and reflect upon the Holy Family today. So let's ask the Lord to come into our lives. Let's again surrender to our God, our family members, those whom we struggle with, those we might be at odds with, those that we celebrate, those who have wonderful achievements. It's in every part of our family, your family, my family. We all got these different aspects of life that we are so happy, and there are members in our family that we're so disappointed with. Perhaps you found that throughout these days of Christmas. It all comes together, doesn't it, at Christmas time. But today, as we reflect on the Holy Family, let's, in the spirit of Hannah, and it wasn't easy, but it was through God's grace that she can say, Lord, this is your children. This is the gift I give back to you. And let's pray that we would hear, as Mary heard, Jesus say to us, I'm God. I've got it. Continue to pray. Continue to bless. Continue to call out to me. I've got this. I'm God. I am the Lord and I am the Saviour. And so let's ask the Lord again to strengthen us. He says, St John says in the second reading, think of the love the Father has lavished upon us. Maybe not think about it, but see it here in our midst. Celebrate it in your midst as you gather together as family, that this is the love of God. Yes, we have foibles and quarrels and divisions. That's humanity. That's the mess of humanity. But look at this. Jesus came into the mess of humanity. He came into a stable. There's nothing pristine about that. It's messy. And so today, in this Christmas season, let's invite Jesus, who came into that stable, to shed light, that he will come into our lives to shed light into those terrible relationships, those hard relationships, those unforgiving relationships at the time. Let him shed light again. There he is, open-armed. Let him receive us, receive members of our family, and let's continue to pray. Those prayers are never unheard. And we have that beautiful gift of Monica, St. Monica, who prayed for years and years and years with great tears for her family to come back to God. And look what happened to Augustine. He became a great saint. There's hope for us yet. And God is in a work of progress. God is in control if we allow him to be the Messiah of which he is.